Hi everybody, it's Rebecca Virginia, and today I'm going to be bringing you a Christmas video featuring lots of gnome DIYs. I absolutely love gnomes around the holiday season. I think they are so cute. And first up, I am going to be showing you a DIY garland using some yarn to make lots of little gnomes. Here are all of the supplies that you'll need to complete this DIY on your own. Alright, so we are going to kick off this adorable gnome garland by taking a toilet paper roll, and I cut about an inch wide strip. I didn't measure it, but I kind of guesstimated an inch. And then I took this green yarn. It is going to be the hat for some of our gnomes. Some I'll be using red, and I wrapped it around long ways my iPhone 8 Plus about 32 times. And now we're going to start making our hat. So I have an extremely detailed video on how to make this, which I will link above. I did it last year for an ornament, but I'll still explain it a little bit in this video. But if you needed some more angles or more in-depth instructions, go ahead and watch that video. But basically, I'm taking the long piece of, I keep calling it ribbon, but it is yarn, and I'm making a loop, and then I'm pulling it around and through that loop, kind of like if you were making a knot. So again, there's the loop. I thread it under the toilet paper roll and then pull the yarn through and pull it tight. And you're just going to do that for a pretty long time until you cover the entire toilet paper roll. And now we're going to make kind of like the brim of the hat. And you do this by pushing all of the yarn through the toilet paper roll. So now you can see where the brim section of our snow hat is going to be. And now we need to make the pom-pom area. So I'm just taking a piece of that same green yarn and just tying it tight. And then when you pull it through, you can kind of see where the pom-pom is starting to form. I'm going to leave mine long since I'm going to be tying it for garland. And to make my hat nice and poofy, I am taking 3 cotton balls and just pushing those up in the hat and just kind of spreading out the yarn to make sure you can't see the cotton ball. And this is my favorite part, it's when you trim the yarn at the top and it just makes that fun little poof ball, which is going to be on the top of our gnome's hat. Alright, so now I'm placing my hat to the side and we're going to move on to the gnome's beard. And I'm pretty much doing the exact same thing, but this time with white yarn, wrapping it around my iPhone about 30 times. And this one will be a little bit different. So what I did is in the center, I am taking another piece of white yarn and tying it super, super tight right in the center of the loops that we just formed. And then on each of them, I am going to go ahead and take my scissors and cut. And you can kind of see how this is starting to form our gnome's beard. And then you just kind of smush them down and your gnome's beard is starting to form. And to make sure that doesn't move around in the hat, I am hot gluing, and you want to make sure you hot glue the edges of the hat, not the actual cotton balls, because then the hat will just fall off. And you just kind of hold that until your hot glue sets and your gnome's beard is tucked up inside of the hat. And I'm just taking a plain wood bead to be the gnome's nose, and I am hot gluing that right underneath the hat so it looks like his nose is peeking through, and I added a little shiny snowflake to go on his hat. Also, I didn't catch this on camera, but I did shape his beard a bit to be more like a letter V so that it was longer in the front and then got shorter on the sides. And I went ahead and completed all of my gnomes going on my garlands by adding a bunch more in also red hats as well as the green. The next DIY is a trio of wood gnomes. Don't worry if you don't have any scrap wood laying around. You can always use a large piece of foam cardboard from the Dollar Tree, or I'm sure a lot of us have cardboard boxes laying around from Christmas gifts we've ordered, so you can always use a piece of the cardboard. Here's what else you need to make this. My pieces of scrap wood measure 11 inches and 7 inches for the two smaller ones, but you can really make these whatever size that you want. If you know where you want to put this in your house, you can figure out what size would look best. I painted them white just to kind of have a primer, and then I taped out a triangle section in the bottom, I'd say third, and I'm going back in with some white paint just to make it even more of a bright white, and some brown paint because our gnomes have probably been hanging out in the garden and have a little bit of dirt to them. So you can see it's not a huge difference when I remove the tape, but I did want something, again, a bit more of a bright white. And then I'm taping out the other section so that we have two smaller triangles. And on the large one and the smaller one, I'm going to be using a gray paint. And then the other one, you can't really see. I didn't know that it was out of frame. I'll show you it. I realize it in a little bit, and then I bring it back into frame. But I did gray on these two, and then I did a dark green on the last one. For my gnomes' hats, I wanted two of them to have the same one. And then I did a different buffalo check one on the green gnome, and I just applied this using a glue stick. Next, it was time to start adding the embellishments to my gnome. I had some wood stickers from the Dollar Tree, and then I also had these felt snowflakes for the Dollar Tree, and I used some of this dark red berry garland and wrapped this around my largest gnome and then the other one that I was kind of mimicking. And I wrapped that around both of them, and then for the one that was a little bit different with the green, I kept the Dollar Tree garland theme, but I decided to make it a little bit more fun and Christmassy, so I took the Jingle Bell garland and wrapped that around him. For the gnome's noses, I used two different techniques. So for the first one, I just used a wood bead, but I thought he needed a larger nose on my largest 11-inch gnome. So I just took some of this like white, very pale pink pantyhose, and I placed two little pom-poms inside, but you could also use a cotton ball. And I twisted that into a ball and then just secured it with a clear elastic from the girls' hair section of the Dollar Tree, and then cut off the excess, and now I have my gnome's nose. To add a little flush to the gnome's nose, I took some of my blush and just a makeup brush and added a little bit of that onto the nose before taking my hot glue gun and hot gluing down the pantyhose nose as well as the wood bead nose. The next DIY is an adorable Gnome Bottle Tag. This looks great when you're gifting wine for Christmas, or it could even be a bottle of apple cider. You'll just hang the gnome off the side and it adds an adorable Christmas decoration to your gift. You could also just use this as an ornament. Here are all of the supplies that you'll need to recreate this DIY. This is going to seem like a very familiar technique as our last DIY. I am taking this ball of yarn and I wrapped it around my phone. You guessed it, about 30 to 32 times. And this was a thicker yarn, so it was a little bit harder to take off of my phone once I was done. But then you are just going to slide it off of your phone, cut one of the ends of the loop, and now we have some long pieces of yarn exactly the same as we did when we made the hat in the previous DIY. And I am taking a shower ring that is, of course, from the Dollar Tree. This is going to be the main supply in this DIY. And I am doing two pieces of yarn at a time, and I'm using the same technique as I did in the previous DIY, taking the two pieces of yarn, making a loop, threading that loop underneath the shower ring, then pulling the yarn over and through the loop and pulling it tight on the other side. And as you're doing this, make sure that you are pushing down the yarn on both sides and really smushing them kind of together. You end up fitting actually quite a bit more yarn after you do this so that your gnome has a nice and full beard. We're also going to be making a hat for this gnome too, and I'll be using the exact same technique as before. I am taking a 1-inch wide piece of my toilet paper roll, and then I took some red yarn, wrapped it around my phone about 30 times, and we're going to make a hat yet again using our looping technique. And I just went with a solid color red this time, not the multicolors of green. So I just went all the way around my toilet paper holder with this. And just like before, once I've gone all the way around the toilet paper roll, I am going to gather the ends of the yarn and push it through the hat so we create that hat brim. Then this time, instead of using the same colored yarn as the hat, I'm going to be taking that textured white yarn that we used on our gnome's beard, and I'm going to make a really long tag because this is going to be going on a wine bottle. So I'm going to tie a knot just like we did in our previous DIYs, but when I loop it this time, I'm just going to leave the ends because I'm not sure how long I want this to hang on my bottle. So I'm just going to leave those ends nice and long. And then again, my favorite part, trimming the pom-pom. Now we have to put our hat on our gnome, and the toilet paper roll fits perfectly over the shower ring. You just kind of slide that down, and you could adhere it with a little bit of hot glue. Mine was really snug, so I didn't, but if for some reason yours is loose, you can add a little hot glue. And then I took a wood bead again, and in between his beard and his hat, I just hot glued that. And this is funny, I had ordered a new brush for my golden doodle puppy, but before I tried it out on him, it was just sitting on my dresser, so I figured, all right, I will test this out on my gnome. So I just kind of ran that through the yarn to make it a little bit more messy and wild. And then I'm again shaping his beard in kind of a V or a U shape, and I'm using a plate as my guide. It just helped make things a lot easier and made sure that I gave him a correct haircut. And that is the completed gnome bottle tag. You can test him out on your bottle and make sure that he is the correct length. Then just tie him behind the bottle and he will hang off of it. You could even add a little tag that says to or from near his hat, or just leave it plain. Our next DIY is a light up gnome jar. I knew when I was doing a gnome video I wanted to do something with light so that it would look magical at night, and I used an unlikely jar to create this project. Here's what you need to make this. The unlikely jar I mentioned earlier is going to be a pickle jar, and I'm also using one of these ladies' socks from the Dollar Tree. I used a regular sock because it was pretty see-through when you stretch it over our pickle jar, so that's why I didn't use one of the fuzzier or more thick socks at the Dollar Tree. And make sure that you really wash the pickle jar because it will still smell like pickles. So after giving it a good couple washes to make sure that smell was out, I cut off the heel of my lady's sock and then just placed the jar inside of the sock. And I'm going to be cutting where the grooves are in the jar so that the lid can still get on. But to make sure that my sock doesn't fall down or reveal my actual pickle jar, I am using a bit of hot glue to just make sure that that sock stays up. You are also going to be able to see a little bit of the lid, so I went ahead and painted that white. To make our gnome's hat and his beard, I am taking one of these ornaments from the Dollar Tree. It looks a little scary when you rip the hat off Santa's head, especially when you rip the beard off, but we're going to be using the hat for our gnome, and I just wrapped a little bit of jute around it to kind of make it look a little bit more wooden and whimsical. And then I just put some stuffing up in the hat to make sure it kept its form, and then I carefully removed the beard on our Santa. This is what we're going to be using as our gnome's beard. I also added one of these wood snowflake stickers that the Dollar Tree currently has out, and I just hot glued that onto his hat. Now we are going to move on to assembling our light up gnome. So this is a pretty important step, and I actually kind of messed up on it a little bit, you'll see, so hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. but everything that you're going to be hot gluing is going to be on the pickle jar lid and not on the pickle jar. And this is so that you can still unscrew the lid and fit your lights in. So I'm taking my hot glue and just hot gluing the Santa beard onto the pickle jar lid. And as you can see, you can still remove the lid. I left a bit of the, I think it was the Santa beard or fur on the back of the hat because I thought it helped hide the pickle jar lid. So I am just hot gluing the hat onto the lid and then hot gluing down some of the hair or the beard in the back that was kind of sticking up. And here is where I messed up, so please learn from my mistake. When I hot glued down my wood bead, I accidentally hot glued it below the pickle jar lid. So you want to make sure that you are hot gluing that wood bead onto the pickle jar lid. You will see in just a moment how I messed that one up. And then I am just trimming my gnome's beard and shaping it a bit, kind of making it longer in the front and shorter on the sides. Next, I grabbed some Dollar Tree lights, and then when I went to unscrew the lid is when I realized, oh no, I hot glued the nose onto the actual jar part. But lucky for me, it didn't really mess it up. It would have been a lot worse if I had glued the beard onto the pickle jar. But because it was just the nose, I could still unscrew and screw back on the lid. It was just a little bit harder and more inconvenient, but it still worked out. I could take the lid on and off. Next, I have one of my absolute favorite DIYs from last year, my gnome in a home. I found these great tin buckets from the Dollar Tree, and the reason I love them so much is because there's already a lot of jute wrapped around the top of it, so that takes a lot of the work out. So now I'm just taking some of these floral foam blocks and I'm hot gluing them together and putting them into the tin bucket. I'm going to be sticking down my gnome inside as well as a lot of floral picks, so I had to get the floral foam all the way down into the bucket and around the edges because I need something to hot glue the Spanish moss onto. I wanted to see how much space my gnome was going to take up sitting on top of the bucket, so the first step that I'm doing after I place down all the floral foam is to place them into the bucket. So what I'm having to do is I'm taking some of this floral wire that came off of a floral pick and I'm putting this up him, and then I'm going to stake him down into the bucket to see how much space that he is taking up. You could also use a kebab stick for cooking or just a wood dowel. Next, I am taking some Spanish moss that I got from the Dollar Tree and I am hot gluing that down and onto the floral foam. And this will take a little bit of time, but you just have to place it all around, and I liked that I had put the gnome in before because I was able to see the hole that he would go into and I knew that I didn't have to fill that area with the Spanish moss. The next step is by far the most fun. Once you have your gnome placed into his home, you can start decorating it. And all of these floral picks are from the Dollar Tree, and a lot of them are leftover from previous projects, so I just kind of had a bag of these laying around, so you get to kind of use the scraps from your previous projects. And I'm just adding some garland, some holly, poinsettias, pine cones, and really making this home nice and homey for my gnome. I also had some ribbon that said Home for the Holidays, so I thought it would fit perfectly with my gnome in the Gnome for the Holidays theme. So I put that onto the front of the bucket, and then I had some copper twinkly fairy lights, so I also placed those all around my gnome, and I think he was very happy in his new home. Next DIY is a Gnome for the Holidays book stack, of course featuring the Dollar Tree gnome. The first step in this DIY is to cover your books. So I am taking some craft paper, and this is a coffee table book that I had and a couple others that were just laying around my house. And the first thing that we're going to do is cover them. So I laid the book onto the craft paper, and where the book began at the top and ended at the bottom, I made folds. After that, I took the book off of the craft paper and I was able to see those indentations in the paper, so I was able to make a hard fold and place the book on top of that. And then I did the same thing again with the bottom of the book. I was able to see where the crease was, and then I made the hard fold and placed the book back on top. Next, I am going to repeat that process with the front cover of the book and the back cover. When I opened it, I made an indentation as to where it should be folded. Then once I folded it, because of the top and bottom folds from earlier, it created a pocket or a jacket sleeve for the book. and the front cover was able to just slide right in. I did the same with the back of the book, making that little jacket pocket and slipping the book into the cover. Next, it was time to add the Gnome for the Holidays onto the books. So I lined up the books how I wanted them to be, and then I started from the right to the left just in case I ran out of space. And these are rub-on transfer letters that I got from the Dollar Tree. So I just spelled out my word and then I took off the backing and put it onto the book, rubbed it on, and gently pulled away, and then the letter was left. Again, I highly suggest in going from right to left, just in case you run out of space or maybe misjudged how long your word was going to be. I found this to be a lot easier to just have all the words cut out and be able to put them on, again, right from left. You could also use regular stickers for this. I liked the rub-on because it does look like they're handwritten, and I don't have the greatest handwriting, or certainly not as good as these rub-on letters, so I liked the way that they came out, and they had a little bit more of a homemade feel to me than a regular sticker. Make sure you're careful when peeling off the front part of the rub-on letters. If you do it slowly, you can see if part of your letter still needs to be rubbed on longer, so just make sure that you pull it slowly. Now I'm taking some of this really pretty, it looks like a candy cane, red and white twine, and I'm just tying it around the books 3 times and then tying a knot and making a small bow. Final step of this DIY, of course, involves our amazing Dollar Tree gnome. I still can't believe he's only $1 when he's weighted and so tall. Absolutely love him, and here he is sitting on top of his book stack that says Gnome for the Holidays. The last gnome DIY is made from a mop head and a sign from the Dollar Tree. The first thing I did for this DIY was take some sandpaper to the sign. The sign had a lot of glitter on it, and I didn't want any of the glitter showing through the scrapbooking paper or getting all over the place, so I sanded that. And then I took off the Santa mustache as well as the little cuff on his hat. Then I took some red and black buffalo check scrapbooking paper, and that's what I was using to cover the Santa hat and make my gnome hat. I got all of my scrapbooking paper from Hobby Lobby when they do the 4 for $1 sale. It's just a lot better bargain than any of the scrapbooking paper I've seen at the Dollar Tree. Then I took some Mod Podge on a paintbrush and painted that onto the sign, and then I added the scrapbooking paper on top. To make sure that the scrapbooking paper didn't have any air bubbles, I'm using an old gift card to smooth it out. Now is the part where we get to use our mop head, and this is a fun part because we are using the mop to create our gnome's long beard. I got this mop head from the Dollar Tree, of course, and I am just taking all of the mop strands and one by one placing them along the sign. And you have more than enough in one mop package to create your gnome's beard. I'm going to be placing down some white fabric to make my gnome's hat cuff, so first I am covering that area with white paint just so that the red and the black don't show through. Now I am cutting my fabric, and I cut it 3 inches in width, and I am just using a hot glue gun to hem it. This is actually an old scarf, but you could use a scarf, a sock, any kind of fabric you have laying around, maybe a sweater you were going to give away. And then you're just going to place it on the hat and make sure that it's overlapping onto his beard. The reason why you want it to overlap is so that you won't see where the mop starts, and later when we put his cute little nose on, it'll look like it's peeking out from under his hat cuff. When I gave my gnome a haircut, I first put down a plate so that it was longer in the front and shorter on the sides. You can cut it however you would like. You can have it super long or cut it a little bit shorter. Next, to make his nose, I didn't have a wood bead, which would have been perfect. So I took some cotton balls and I stuck it in an old stocking that I had, and then I wrapped it with some pipe cleaner to keep it in place. Then I took some real blush that I have and I added that onto his nose so it would have a rosy glow. I attached his nose with some hot glue and put it in the center of the sign and a little bit underneath the cuff so it looked like his nose was peeking out. Then I shaded the hat with some black paint and a dry brushing technique to add some definition. I thought my gnome was looking a little plain, so to add a little bit of pizzazz, I took this sparkly snowflake and added it to the middle of his hat. I also took a large jingle bell and added that to the very tip of his hat. To make this gnome into a hanging sign, I took one of the little mop strands and I tied it in a knot and looped it, and then I just hot glued it to the back and it transformed into a hanging gnome sign. Thanks for watching my Dollar Tree Christmas Gnome DIYs. If you want to see more craft videos from me, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Until next time, keep searching, keep creating.